Shalom, friends. Welcome. This is Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. Today we're learning Talmud, Gemara Berachot, the Gemara dealing with blessings. And we've made our way so far to Daf Daled, Amud Aleph. This is a very exciting Gemara at the moment, so I hope that you'll stay tuned for the rest of the Shi'ur because there are really some exciting sections that are coming up. In our last Shi'ur, we ended off with a discussion about King David HaMelech, being approached by the leaders of the Jewish people when King David would go through his evening davening. He would pray to God from KeChatzot onwards, from midnight onwards, he would pray to God and he would sing songs and so on and so forth. And when it became the early morning, his day would begin. And on one particular occasion, the sages came in and they explained to King David that there wasn't enough food, there wasn't enough parnasah for the Jewish people. Would the king please suggest a way of how the Jewish people could find extra food? And King David basically said to them, well, you should support each other. That's the best thing to do. And the Gemara said King David's answer wasn't exactly on target, because the truth is that if there is a poverty situation amongst a group of people and each one tries to support the other, then ultimately somebody's going to lose out in any case, because the amount of money in the situation is limited. What one needs to do is to source out external income and bring that into the new flow of the economy. So what happened over here is King David then gave an answer, and he said what you need to do is to go out to war. You need to go off and destroy people and to basically loot them and take from them take from the enemy whatever they have, until ultimately you will have the wealth and whatever it is that you needed. But it wasn't a simple matter. It wasn't just a matter of saying, well, the kings declared war and off they went to war and they killed whoever they wanted to kill. Rather, there was a process that was involved. And the verse told us that within this process that was involved, a number of people were consulted. The verse said on page Daf Gimel Amud Beis, the verse said, for Omar Rav Yosef Makra, what is the verse that proved the different points as to what they went through? It's written, Achitophel ben Yehoyada ve'Evyasar v'Saltzava lemelech Yoav. All these people had to be consulted. What does it mean, Achitophel? What does it mean that, first of all, Achitophel was consulted? He was the advisor. And so it says, that the advice of Achitophel, that he would give advice in those days when a man would ask the word of God. So first of all, Achitophel was consulted. After Achitophel was consulted, Ben Yahu ben Yehoyada. What did the verse mean when it said Ben Yahu ben Yehoyada? The Sanhedrin. That refers to the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin were consulted afterwards with regards to this whole story about going to war and looting the enemy. Ve-Evyasar, and what does Evyasar have to do with it? Urim Ve-Tumim. This relates to the Urim Ve-Tumim because, of course, Evyasar was a Kohen, and the Kohen had the privilege of the Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate, and on the breastplate inside there was a parchment which had the name of God written on it. And when one would go to the Kohen Gadol and the high priest, and one would ask a question, the power of the name, which is called the Urim Ve-Tumim, that was inside the breastplate, would begin to light up the stones that were on the breastplate and give an answer. So we see that there were a number of processes that were involved. And so also the pasuk says, ben Yehoyada ala Kreisi v'ala Plesi. And Ben ben Yehoyada was on the Kreisi and the Plesi. Why was their name called the Kreisi or Plesi? Kreisi, it was called the Kreisi because shekorisim divreihem, that they were very decisive from the word korate, like to cut something, as in cutting their words. They were able to give a psak and say, this is what needs to be done. Pleti, why were they called the Pleti? Shemuflaim b'divreihem, because they had amazing things with their words, from the word pele, which means amazing, Pleti. And afterwards, Tsar Tzava lemelech Yoav. Afterwards was the head of the army of the king, and that was Yoav. Now, so that's basically where we ended off on the last shiur, and that was the story that related to King David. Once again, I welcome you to this particular shiur where we're learning from the beautiful Koren Talmud Bavli edition. You'll see on the screen, you can follow with me the Hebrew text. Of course, it doesn't appear as it appears in the original Gemara, but that's okay because we're taking it slowly. Our intention is not to focus on trying to memorize how the page looks, and our focus is also not on trying to complete the page within an hour to work at the pace of Daf Yomi. We're working through it together. We're trying to learn how to learn the Gemara, and we're trying to appreciate the different parts of the halacha that come about and to appreciate the stories that come about. So you'll notice over here we have the original text that appears in the middle of the page. We have the translation on the right, and please do follow along, even if I'm translating it slightly different. Please follow along on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side in the bottom of the page are various notes, halachic rulings, as well as biographies of the rabbis that we are speaking about in the Gemara. So there's really a lot to learn, and I hope that you will enjoy the journey together with me as I'm learning this together with you. And we continue over here now on a new section. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Ada. V'omri la Omar Rav Yitzchak berei de Rav Idi. So Rav Yitzchak, the son of Ada, said, V'omri la, and some say, which means to say we don't know exactly who made the statement exactly. It could have been a mistake in the tradition. Some people say that it was Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Idi, not Rav Yitzchak, the son of Ada, but the Rav Yitzchak, the son of Idi. He said the following statement: My kara. The Gemara is asking a question. What is the verse? Meaning what? We have to go back in our discussion of what we were discussing before, because the way of the Gemara is very often to finish off a subject, and then immediately it starts a new subject, which actually relates to a previous subject that we discussed before. And what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to fill in the words as to what it is that the Gemara is referring to when it uses this particular expression. In this particular expression, just from jumping ahead, I have an idea of what the Gemara is referring to. And when it says Mikra, what is the verse? The Gemara is asking a question: what is the verse that teaches us that King David would wake up at midnight due to the fact that his Kinor, his violin or his harp or whatever this musical instrument is that he had? How do we know? What is the verse that proves that this is what King David would wake up to? This is the particular instrument that would wake up King David at midnight. Because we learned that King David woke up at midnight to begin his service of God. He was praying, he was reciting songs, but of course, in those days, they didn't have digital watches, and they didn't have even analog alarm clocks or anything like that. So how was it that he would wake up? He would wake up because his harp or this musical instrument that he had would awaken him. What is the verse that proves that the harp, whatever it was, the musical instrument, this stringed musical instrument, would awaken him? Ura chavodi, ura hanevel v'chinor a'ira shachar. Because the pasuk says, let awaken my glory, awaken my harp, awaken the lyre. A'ira shachar, I will awaken the morning. What does that mean? I will awaken the morning. Of course, King David was one up on the average person, even though he was a king. And even though it was the way of kings to awaken much later on in the day than the average person to begin the day, he was entitled to sleep longer. He was the king. But nevertheless, King David says, A'ira shachar, I awaken the dawn. This is a great mitzvah. I'm the one that awakens the dawn, and the dawn does not awaken me. I wake up, and through my awakening, I'm the one that stirs the sun to come up, so to speak. I awaken the dawn. So the first thing that would happen is that his honor, so to speak, the glory would awaken. And then the navel, which is translated here as the harp, and the kinor, which is translated as the lyre, another type of harp, a musical instrument, string musical type of instrument. So this is the verse that proves that these were the things. This is the thing that awoke King David. Rabbi Zera Omar. Rabbi Zera says something interesting. Moshe le'olam havayada. You should know something. We learned before in a previous page in the Gemara that it came out that Moshe didn't really know when midnight was. How do we know that? because when Moshe told Pharaoh that all of the firstborn were going to die at midnight, he didn't say to them, Bechatzos Laila, at the midnight period. He said, KeChatzot. He said, at about midnight, that is when the destruction will happen of all the firstborn sons, that they would all be killed in the last of the 10 plagues. So the Gemara points out over here, very interesting. We're trying to analyze and understand, how did these people really know when it was midnight? And if so, how did they know when it was midnight, etc.? Says the Gemara, Moshe le'olam hava yada. Moshe really did know when it was midnight. For David, nami hava yada. And actually, King David also knew when it was midnight. In other words, what's strange about what we're learning is that King David knew when it was midnight. Moshe knew when it was midnight. But the point is, according to the first interpretation that we had, Moshe didn't know it was midnight, and that's why he used an expression saying KeChatzos halayla. At about midnight, that is when the destruction will occur. He didn't say it would occur at midnight, indicating he didn't know when it was midnight. King David, he had a harp, or this lyre, that would awaken him at midnight. Therefore, it seems that he didn't know when midnight was. The Gemara points out, no, David nami hava yada. King David also knew when it was midnight. V'kevan de David hava yada, says the Gemara, since it was that King David already knew when midnight was, Kinor lamelei. The Gemara asked the question, with regards to this harp, this lyre, why did he need it? Lamelei. Why did he need it? What did he need the harp for? He already knew when it was midnight. Answers the Gemara, li'iturei mishintei, because to awaken him from his sleep. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that a person knows when midnight is. The most important thing is he's asleep and he needs to wake up. He needs an alarm clock. And therefore, the harp would awaken him at midnight. Not because he didn't know when it was midnight. He knew. But at that point in time, he's kind of sleeping or not so sleeping. And it could be that midnight passes by and he doesn't realize midnight is there and he didn't take note of it. Therefore, the harp would begin to play its music and through the winds blowing through the strings, and it would awaken King David and tell him it's now midnight, even though he really knew that it was midnight. The Kevan de Moshe hava yada. Let's go back now to the story of Moshe. Since Moshe already knew when midnight was, because that's what we just said earlier before, the Gemara asked the question, why does the verse have to say, why did he have to say KeChatzot at about midnight? He didn't say that the plague was going to occur at midnight. He said it would occur at about midnight. Answers the Gemara, Moshe kasavar. Moshe held. Shema yitu itztagninei Pharaoh. Perhaps the astrologers of Pharaoh will make a mistake. V'yomru, and they will say, Moshe badai hu. Moshe is a fabricator. He is a liar. He's telling stories. You see, the whole point is like this. Moshe Rabbeinu is supposed to be the representative as the Mashiach of this particular generation who's going to redeem the Jewish people out of Egypt. Well, if you're going to be the Redeemer, you've got to be on top of things. You have to be the best possible being that there is. You can't be a liar. You can't be somebody who's not telling the truth. You can't be somebody who's fabricating stories. So strict were the Egyptians that they were going to criticize Moshe Rabbeinu, that when Moshe says that at midnight the plague is going to occur, but if the plague doesn't occur at midnight, but instead it occurs at 11:59, or it occurs at 12:01 or 12:02, and it doesn't occur at exactly midnight, all of the Egyptians are going to say Moshe is a liar because Moshe didn't tell the truth. He said at midnight it was going to happen, and it only happened at 12:01. It happened at 11:59. There are such people in the world. Many people know of them, where if you try to prove something to them or you tell them a particular point which is true, and then they kind of find out that the point wasn't 100% true, they become very upset, very irritated, very angry. They say, you don't know what you're talking about. You said such and such. But the truth is you were 1 point off. You were half a point off. You weren't correct after all. And they make a mockery of you. But the truth of the matter is sometimes it can be the other direction. It can be that the other person made a mistake, and in their calculations, they didn't get it 100%. But because you know how to calculate it the correct way, you were 100% correct. In this particular instance, Moshe Rabbeinu knew the exact moment of midnight. But who is more likely not to know the exact moment of midnight? The Egyptians and Pharaoh himself. God knows the exact moment of midnight. And that is the exact moment that the plague of the firstborn was going to occur. But as far as the astrologers are concerned, as far as the wise men of Egypt are concerned, on their watches, so to speak, it could be that the plague is occurring at 11:59 or 12:01. In such an instance, they're going to call Moshe Rabbeinu a badai. They're going to call him a liar, a fabricator, a teller of tales. Look at him. He thinks he's Mashiach. He thinks he's in charge, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Therefore, says the Gemara, this is the reason that when Moshe came to Pharaoh and he wanted to tell them when the plague is going to occur of the death of the firstborn, he did not use the expression bechatzot, at midnight, even though he knew exactly when midnight would be, but he used the word KeChatzot, at about midnight, which means that if the plague occurs on the astrologers, on the watch of the astrologer, or if it occurs in whatever format it occurs for all the Egyptians that are looking at the time, and they see it's 11:59 or 12:01, they'll be reminded that Moshe told them, yes, indeed, at about midnight, that is when the plague will occur. So Moshe Kasavan, Moshe held, Shema Yitu Itztagnine Paro, Vayomru Moshe Batayu. They'd say that Moshe is a liar. To Omar Mar, because Mar taught, and Mar means that the master, whoever this master is in this particular instance, taught the following teaching, a teaching for life. Never forget it. Lamed Leshoncha Lomar. Teach your tongue to say, Eini Yodeya. I don't know. There's a great principle. The Torah is teaching us a lesson for life. Teach your tongue to say, I do not know. Shema tispadeh v'teaches. Because it could be that you'll be found out to be a liar, and then people will hold you in contempt as a result of that. You'll become entangled in a web of deceit, which means to say that if a person is asked a question and he doesn't really know the answer, and he makes up a certain type of fabrication which seems to make sense, all is well and good, until, of course, somebody catches him out. Then when the person catches him out, he becomes filled with mockery, laughter, scorn, all sorts of levity against this person, laughing at him, joking about him. The person thought he knew what he was talking about. He didn't know a thing. Therefore, says the Gemara, when you're in doubt about something, when I'm in doubt about something, I need to say, Eini Yodeya. I do not know. Somebody says, do you know when this is going to happen? Do you know about this particular subject? Can you tell me this and this and this? Well, if a person isn't a Navi, or a person isn't qualified enough in the particular subject that he's being asked about, all he needs to say is, Eini Yodeya. I don't know. This is the better path. Nobody can catch one out, and nobody can hold one in contempt and say, this person is simply a liar, making up stories. He wants people to give him honor, and so on and so forth. This is the lesson that we get from Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he knew the exact time that the plague would occur at midnight, he did not say that the plague will occur at midnight because he doesn't want to be caught out. Instead, he said the plague will occur at about midnight. And he certainly wasn't wrong, because no matter which Egyptian would be looking at his clock at that point in time, Moshe would be correct. Whether it was 5 minutes before on that person's watch, or 5 minutes after, or 10 seconds after, or 10 minutes before, it makes no difference. It would always be considered within the realm of KeChatzot. But as far as Moshe is concerned, Moshe knew the exact moment that the plague of the 10th plague, the plague of the death of the firstborn, would occur at exactly midnight period. Let's just see these few points that we have missed out here. We discussed this point last week. I'm just going through it one more time because it's a part of the Gemara and it helps us to understand. From what verse is it derived? Mikra. These are two key words in the Gemara. Every time we see it, we know what it means. Literally, this means what is the verse? What is the biblical basis for this rabbinic statement? As we said earlier before, we said my kara. Here we see it over here, my kara. What is the verse that proved that King David knew when it was midnight? And most of the time, the term is employed to connote a biblical allusion to something that seems to be of rabbinic origin. Then he brings down a note here with regards to language, and he says that the word itzdaginim, which means astrologers, The meaning of this word is clear from the context, meaning to say that when we read it, we understand what's going on. The astrologers are stargazers and magicians, possessors of secret wisdom. The source of the word is unclear, meaning in the Gemara, and that's one of the reasons that it's called the Talmud Bavli, from the word Bavel, meaning babble, to babble, because sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes there are words in it that aren't exactly within the language of the beautiful Lashon HaKodesh or even Aramaic. Some have suggested it is related to this Greek word over here, and I apologize that I don't read Greek, and perhaps I should spend some time trying to learn how to read Greek or various other languages so that we can see more about it. But in the meantime, it is related to this Greek word, which means hidden or concealed. Consequently, the meaning is allegorical, i.e., those who engage in hidden areas and similar fields. Others say that the source of the word is this Greek word over here. Again, I don't know how to pronounce it, which means wizards. So the Itztagnim of Egypt, of Pharaoh, were the astrologers, the magicians. And the magicians would come along and they would call Moshe Rabbeinu a fabricator, somebody involved in lies, and catch him out, because he said that the plague would occur exactly at midnight, and in fact it occurred only at about midnight. So he was careful with his words, and from this we learn one should always be careful with one's words, and one never has to reveal everything to people all the time. When people ask questions all the time, one doesn't have to answer every single point that they say, because lest it could be he'll be caught out himself, and people will say to him, you made a mistake, I can't ask you questions, you're a fool. Instead, when we don't really know the answer, teach one's tongue to say, Eini Yodea, oh, I'm very sorry, I don't know. At least one is safe. If one says, I don't know, people can't tell if the person is wise or a fool. But if a person comes out and he gives all sorts of answers, and then he gets caught out later on, people will call him a fool, and they'll mock him, and they'll laugh at him. Rav Ashi Omar. Rav Ashi said, we continue, Bepalga Orta, the Tleisar, Naghe Arbasar. Havakae. Rav Ashi says that it was at the halfway point of the evening of the 13th, which was actually the morning of the 14th. This is when the plague, this is when it was actually going to happen. This is when the prophecy happened. V'hachi ka'amar Moshe liYisrael. This is actually when the time period was that Moshe Rabbeinu was standing in front of Pharaoh, and he was announcing to him that the plague is going to occur at this point, meaning tomorrow. This is what he said. Amar Moshe liYisrael. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Lemachar, tomorrow, KeChatzot halayla, at about midnight. Ki ha'idana. It means this time. Ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim. I'm going out amongst Egypt. Which means tomorrow night, at about the same time that we're talking to each other now, meaning in 24 hours' time from this point, that's when the plague is going to occur. And that's when it did occur. We conclude that section, and the Gemara continues to the next section. LeDavid, as we learned before, the Gemara is made up of all sorts of confusing parts, different segments, different sections all over the show, and it's not necessarily that one segment is directly related to another. Sometimes the thoughts just flow from one idea to the next. This is not the Shulchan Aruch. We are not learning halacha in order from how we wake up in the morning and how we put on tzitzit and how we go to the bathroom and how we put on tefillin and how we daven. It's not an order to it. Everything is mixed up in a bundle. And we need to take out from it the different parts that we can apply as they come out, as we learn them. LeDavid. Shamra nafshi ki Chassid ani. King David said, God, he's talking to God, preserve my soul, for I am a Chassid. God, my soul, for I am a Chassid. Fine. Levi, for Rabbi Yitzchak, these two rabbis, they have opinions about the meaning of this pasuk. Levi and Rabbi Yitzchak. Chad Amar, one of them said, Chad is the Aramaic word for the Hebrew word echad, the same word. One said, we don't know which one said it, perhaps Levi is the one who said it, if we go in order, perhaps Rabbi Yitzchak said it. We don't know who said what. Koch Amar David, Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what David said in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam, lo Chassid ani. David was asking Hashem, am I not a Chassid? Am I not a pious person? I'll tell you why, because that's what he's saying here. The David Shamra Nafshi Ki Chassid Ani. God, he says to God, guard my soul, G-U-A-R-D, protect my soul, because I am a Chassid. So he's saying, am I not a Chassid? Shekol Malchei Mizrachu Ma'arav Yeshenim Ad Shalosh Shaot. All the kings of the east and the west are sleeping until 3 hours in the day. Va'ani, and as for me, I awaken at midnight in order to praise you, in order to give thanks to you. Meaning to say that King David is indicating that he was a very pious man. I am a Chassid, because I am not a regular king. I do not get up at the regular time that kings get up. They sleep late into the morning, and then they get breakfast in bed, perhaps, and they get treated like royalty. But as for me, God, I awaken already at KeChatzot, when most people are sleeping, not just the kings. Most people are sleeping. I awaken, and I begin to give thanks and praise to you, God. Let's just take a look at the notes where it says, of David, keep my soul, for I am pious. The David Shama Nafshi Ki Chassid Ani. This expression raises the question of how such unique piety was exhibited. Upon what was David relying when he asked for special protection? The statements of the Amoraim on this issue explore the inner soul of David as it is manifest in the book of Psalms. King David as a penitent. He sought to atone for his two most egregious sins related to the episode with Bathsheba. Quite literally, getting his hands dirty in these areas of halakha. The reason he chose these specific areas was to counterbalance his wrongdoings. On the one hand, he facilitated procreation and increased the population in atonement for his part in the death of Uriah the Hittite. On the other hand, he facilitated intimacy between husbands and their wives as atonement for his conduct with Bathsheba. Therefore, he was able to assert, keep my soul, protect me, guard me, safeguard me, for I am pious. Now, let's just go back for a moment in the Avera. What was the hate? What was the sin that King David committed? There were two parts to the sin that King David committed, for which he held himself liable for the rest of his life. And then for these particular sins, he did Teshuvah basically every single day of his life. And really, this is what the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms, is really all about King David's life, where we find here a real person, a person who, as great as he was, had fallen. But with his fall, he did Teshuvah, and he taught us how to do Teshuvah. He taught us that even if we do wrong, we can still come right. No matter how bad the wrong is, we can still come right. King David wasn't teaching us that we should do wrong, and then afterwards we can do Teshuvah, because that doesn't count for anything. He was teaching us that indeed, if we slip, there is a way to do Teshuvah, to come right. As for King David, he never forgot the sins or the sin that he committed, and he was constantly involved in Teshuvah until the day that he died. What were these particular sins that he was involved in? Number one, according to what we're reading over here, his first sin was with Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite was, in fact, the husband of Bathsheba. And what happened was, at that time, the Jewish people were going to war, and King David had seen Bathsheba, and he had admired her, and he felt that he wanted to have Bathsheba as a wife. So at a certain point in time, what he did is he realized that the only way that he could possibly sort out the situation, that he could perhaps get Bathsheba as to be his wife. And we must remember over here that King David was not just a simple person either. King David saw, as the commentaries teach us, that Bathsheba was actually a part of his soul. Bathsheba was his soulmate. How it is that Bathsheba therefore married Uriah first, this is a different topic of conversation. But in the meantime, he saw within the soul of Bathsheba that was his soulmate. And he felt that he wanted to marry her now, and he didn't know what to do in order to marry her, because she was indeed married to Uriah the Hittite. And what he did was he got his officer in the army to put Uriah in the front lines in the war, knowing fully well that if Uriah was in the front lines, he would be one of the first to be killed. And of course, if he was killed, then at that point in time, King David would be able to marry Bathsheba. So this is sin number one, is that he wanted to kill Uriah. And indeed, Uriah did die in battle. and that gave him the ability to marry Bathsheba. The second point is that, in fact, King David had already committed the sin with Bathsheba before Uriah was killed. But now here's the thing. When King David, when the soldiers would go to war, they would write out for their wives a conditional divorce document, which indicated that were it to be that something would happen to them and the wives wouldn't know any longer what had happened to their husbands, leaving them as agunas, meaning leaving them in a state that they wouldn't be able to marry anybody because the husband could be allowed theoretically. And if the husband is allowed theoretically and the husband didn't give a divorce to his wife, then the wife can't get married to anybody else, even though the husband has disappeared. He's gone AWOL, and nobody knows where he's gone to, and he's disappeared. They can't find him. So therefore, they would write a conditional divorce. And in that way, should anything happen to them, it was considered from the moment that they entered into the army as if already they were divorced. So at this point in time, at the moment that King David was committing this particular Aveira with Bathsheba, theoretically speaking, Uriah and Bathsheba were actually divorced. And therefore, he wasn't committing the Aveira in the fullest extent possible. But of course, all of this is just talk, and it kind of gets us around the situation of imagining how we can get King David out of the situation. Let us not forget that with all of these points, whether theoretically King David committed an Aveira, he didn't commit an Aveira, and we theoretically get him out of the situation of the Aveira, nevertheless, King David knew well what he had done. He knew that he had done wrong. He felt responsible for it, and he wanted to do Teshuvah on this. One of the things that he accepted upon himself to do as Teshuvah for both of these Aveiras, one, in that he sent Uriah to the front lines and Uriah was killed, and two, that ultimately he took Bathsheba, who was married to Uriah, and he took Bathsheba as his own wife. And then again, let us not forget, Bathsheba was the mother of King Solomon, of Shlomo HaMelech, who is ultimately the ancestor of Mashiach. So all of these things that are happening are very mysterious stories. And we can go on and on about the mysterious stories of the soul of Mashiach. Where does Mashiach come from? We know, for example, that Mashiach comes from the relationship between Lot and one of his daughters in particular. We know that that Mashiach comes through a relationship between Ruth, who is a convert, and Boaz, who was the judge of the Jewish people at that time. We see that Mashiach comes through a relationship between Yehuda and Tamar. Tamar is really married to the son of Yehuda, the sons of Yehuda, and then he takes her in a very strange way. She's acting as a prostitute, and all of these very strange relationships ultimately become the ancestor relationships of the birth of Mashiach. Bathsheba and King David were not simple people. And so King David realized also that within this soul of Bathsheba, he saw the spark. He was able to see. He was a great man. He wasn't just a simple man like we speak of ourselves, imagining fantasies of what would be. But he was able to penetrate into the soul and to see and to realize that through Bathsheba, ultimately, there is going to be born the child who will ultimately be the ancestor of Mashiach. So he knew what he was doing, but he knew what he was doing was also wrong. It wasn't something completely kosher. And because of that, he did Teshuvah for the rest of his life. He was upset about this Aveira that he did. He knew he did it, and he kept it in front of him all times, his entire life. What did he do as Teshuvah, according to this note that we're reading over here? The thing that he did is that he used to examine the blood of the ladies who would come to him with niddah blood, asking him whether or not the blood that had flown from their womb, if the blood was considered to be tahor or tameh. He dealt with blood all the time. This involves the laws of niddah, the laws of taharas hamishpacha. Anybody who wants to know more about it, please feel welcome to contact me. I happen to be a chatan teacher, and my wife happens to be a color teacher. And these are the things that we teach the couple that are preparing for marriage, that one of the problems within the marriage relationship that is going to have to be dealt with is the situation of a woman who menstruates. And when she menstruates, when the blood flows from her womb, she becomes a niddah. Now, the thing is that depending on the flow and exactly what is happening, especially the color of the blood at certain points in time, we need to know whether or not the flow that comes out is actually niddah blood, or it's other blood, or it's a wound, or it could be anything of anything. The point of the matter is that choosing between professions of becoming a teacher of Torah, for example, a nice clean profession of sharing the words with people, sharing ideas, stories, halacha, whatever you want, is clean. Or, for example, a person could become a sofer, and he could take ink, and he could take a quill, and he could write beautiful letters. Even this is a nice, beautiful job, and it's clean, and so on and so forth. But when a person accepts upon himself a job of dealing with the impurity of niddah, he is going to be in touch constantly with the concept of blood. He's going to be looking at the blood. He'll have to examine it. He has to see what the color is. He might touch the blood. He might be involved in all sorts of things dealing with blood, which is not very pleasant. Certainly not for a king to be involved in. But King David accepted it upon himself as a teshuvah, because since already he had caused the death of somebody, and since already he had taken a wife away from somebody who was married to this lady, and he shouldn't have done either of these things, which resulted in a possibility of a lack of procreation. He did something that could cause a lack of procreation. He decided that as a method of teshuvah, he would involve himself from that point onwards in the matter of procreation. He would do everything that he could in order to encourage what was necessary so that people will procreate, so that if there's a possibility that there's a blood and the color of the blood is not exactly the red or the black, to invalidate the woman and put her into a state of tumah, of a state of impurity, he would find a way to show how this blood was not that color, and therefore she was pure and she could be with her husband. He took this upon himself for his teshuvah. And this is what it means that King David was speaking about himself as being a Chassid. He said, David, Shama nafshi Chassid ani. He said, guard my soul because I'm a Chassid. Why is he a Chassid? The first point that he says about being a Chassid is he speaks about the idea of waking up in the middle of the night. Not all kings wake up in the middle of the night. In fact, they all wake up in the daytime already. Most people don't wake up in the middle of the night. But I, as a king, and I could sleep late, and I could have breakfast in bed, and all these different things, I awaken at midnight to begin my avodas Hashem, and I begin to daven to Hashem, and I begin to study Torah to Hashem, and all these things. Ve'idach. Now we come to the parts that we're speaking about over here as it relates to this note that we've jumped ahead. And another sage said, remember we said here, Chad Amar, one said that this is what it means, and Ve'idach, the other one says, this is what it means. Kach Omar David Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what King David said in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe. Lo Chassid ani, am I not a pious person? I'll tell you. Shekol Malchei Mizrachu Ma'arav, all the kings of the east and the west. Yoshvim Agudus Bichvoidam, everybody is sitting in groups upon groups in honor. All the kings sit around the table. All the kings sit amongst each other in their company, glorified with honor from people. But what do I do? He says to God. Va'ani, but as for me, Yadai Meluch Lachot Bedam. That was the teshuvah we're speaking about over here. I fill my hands with blood. My hands are filled with blood. I deal with subjects. I deal with the practicalities of blood. Or b'shafir, or b'shelia. And I deal with the fetus from a miscarriage. And I deal with the placenta to decide whether or not a woman will be in a state of impurity because of the birth that has happened, or the placenta that comes out. Do we say that was a child? Is the woman impure, or is the woman still pure? And David HaMelech would examine these various things, much like a medical doctor would examine it on the medical level to see that everything is healthy, medically speaking, physically speaking. David HaMelech dealt with the aspect in the spiritual sense as it pertains to spiritual purity. And the reason that I do this is in order to purify a woman so that she can be with her husband. Because halachically speaking, according to the laws of Niddah, as we said earlier, once there is a flow of blood from the womb, even the smallest, minutest drop of blood that exits the womb of a woman, we say that this is the blood of Niddah. we say that the woman is in a state of impurity, and she must go through a certain process of ritual purity. She goes through a process of waiting for the blood to stop leaving the womb. Then she has to go through a process whereby she counts 7 days of cleanliness where there is no bleeding whatsoever. And even before she performs the 7 days of cleanliness, she goes through a process to examine herself fully to make sure there's no blood. Then she counts the 7 days, and after the 7-day count, she has to go to the she goes through a process to clean herself, and physically speaking, and then afterwards she goes into the mikvah. And after she's gone to the mikvah, and this whole process now that we're speaking about can last 12 days, perhaps 13 days, depending on how long the bleeding takes place for at the time that the blood leaves the womb in the beginning. So what was the whole point of this? Is that David HaMelech did everything that he could to make sure that a woman could be together with her husband. He could find a way. Is it possible that the blood is not the blood of impurity? Let me check it out. If so, then I can say for certain that the couple may be together, which will heighten and increase the chances of procreation. Instead of doing the very thing that caused a lack of procreation, by the avera that he did, by means of killing off a person from the world, so to speak, even though he didn't kill Uriah. He didn't do the killing himself, but he put him in. I mean, there's an army, and somebody's got to be in the front line. And then not necessarily the person in the front line will be killed, but it happens to be that the person who's in the front line stands the greatest risk of being killed. And that is what David HaMelech's plan was. And indeed, that's what happened. He was in the front line, and he was killed in the front line. And so David HaMelech, of course, was to a certain extent, a very large extent, responsible for the death of Uriah the Hittite. And as a result of that, he accepted upon himself to do Teshuvah. And the Teshuvah that he did was in the opposite. We see this concept coming up many times in Torah. People, many times, they commit certain averot, God forbid, and then afterwards they do Teshuvah. And they say, Rabbi, what can I do now for Teshuvah? Should I fast for 6 weeks without eating and drinking? Should I give millions of dollars to charity? Should I do this? Should I do that? They come up with all sorts of things. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the best solution to the problem is to engage in the very thing that was not engaged in before. For example, a person never fulfilled the laws of family purity. And then he goes to the rabbi one day and he tells the rabbi, Rabbi, I never fulfilled these laws of family purity. And I want to do Teshuvah. What should I do? Well, the rabbi tells him immediately, he must fulfill the laws of family purity. So he says, well, is that good enough? Is that all I need to do? So the rabbi says, if you really want to do Teshuvah, you know what you need to do. Start teaching the laws of family purity, so that it's not only you that keeps the laws of family purity, but in addition, you go out and you instruct other people, make it beautiful in their eyes, so that they too will fulfill the laws of family purity. And through that, there'll be one new couple that will observe the laws that wouldn't have observed it had it not been for you. There'll be 2 couples, 3, there'll be 10. You'll have a class of 100 people attending, where you will be the one instructing them on how to engage in these laws of family purity. And all 100 people who now accept and to fulfill these laws of family purity will be doing so because of you. That is the Teshuvah that you can do. A person didn't study Torah in his life. He says, Rabbi, what should I do to do Teshuvah? The rabbi says, study Torah. He says, that's fine. I studied Torah. Look, I'm reading something now. The rabbi says, no. If you really want to do Teshuvah, don't study what you're used to studying. Study extra. If you are accustomed to studying 1 page, in other words, if you felt that 1 page was easy and that you could handle, do 2 pages. Do more. Teach. Teach somebody else what Torah is, so that he'll learn for himself and he'll teach it to somebody else. We use the very means of the negativity to turn something into positivity. And therefore, King David used the same method. Although he had done something negative in the realm of a death that resulted in death because he sent Uriah to the front lines, nevertheless, he took upon himself from that point onwards to do everything that he could to instill and to bring the blessing of birth into the world by means of permitting a woman to a husband. And he did that because he engaged in the laws that relate to blood, the laws of nida and family purity. V'lo od. Not only this, ela kol ma she'ani oseh. But everything that I do, says King David, speaking about himself as a Chassid, ani nimlach b'Mephibosheth, Rabbi. I consult with Mephibosheth, my teacher. Very interesting. His teacher was Mephibosheth. Who was King David's teacher? And indeed, he was the king. Why was he even consulting with anybody? V'omer lo, and he says to him, Mephibosheth Rabbi. That's how he used to talk to Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, my teacher. Yafeh Danti, he would ask him. He would show him the cloth, the knitted cloth. He had just looked at a knitted cloth of a woman where there was blood on it, and he had ruled that this woman was permissible to her husband because when he looked at the color of the blood, he noted that it wasn't a red or a black that would make the woman impure, that she couldn't be with her husband, she'd be in a state of niddah. So immediately after he would look at it and he would make a decision, he would take it afterwards to Mephibosheth, and he would say to Mephibosheth, did I judge well? Yafeh chiyavti, or did I obligate well, meaning the opposite direction? Yafeh zakiti, did I merit well? Did I say that the person is in the right? He's really in the right. Did I do well? Yafeh tiharti, did I purify well? Meaning, did I show that I did things the right way when it came to purity? Yafeh timeti, did I do well with regards to impurity? Did I judge well and say that the person is impure in the correct way? V'lo boshti, and I was never embarrassed. Amazing teaching. King David, the king of all the Jewish people, he himself was obviously a Torah scholar beyond all proportions. And yet, even when he was involved in halakhic psak, and he was making a judgment on something, he would go and consult with Mephibosheth to ask, so to speak, for the second opinion. He wouldn't take it upon his shoulders as if to say, I know everything. But he would go afterwards to Mephibosheth and say, do you think I did all right? Did I say it correctly? Do you agree with me? He needed to consult. He needed to hear that other opinion to make sure in a manner of humility that he wasn't acting in a way of arrogance. Let us see these notes over here on the side. His name, one moment, we're not there yet. Sorry, we're not there yet. Omar Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yeshua said, Omar Rabbi Yeshua bereid Rabbi Idi. Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Rabbi Idi, said the following. Micro, what is the verse that alludes to this whole concept that we've been speaking about? That King David would take his decision to Mephibosheth and he would ask for the second opinion, and yet he wouldn't be embarrassed about it. But we know many people today. Imagine you ask a Torah scholar a question, and he's going to give you an answer immediately. He doesn't want you to, God forbid, go and ask somebody else, and then afterwards the person will give a different reason, and you'll go back to the Torah scholar, and he hear the reason, and then he'll say, oh, you've embarrassed me now, and all this and that. But King David was so humble that when he would give the ruling, whatever the situation was, even if he was found out to be wrong, he wasn't embarrassed. There's nothing to be embarrassed about if a person is devoted to Torah. And his intention is lishma. He's doing everything that he can to do the right thing for the sake of God. And somebody catches him out, says, hey, you did it wrong. He doesn't have to feel embarrassed. What does he feel embarrassed for? He's trying his best to do right. If he finds out that he's doing wrong and he's able to correct it, kol hakavod, he's on the right track. Baruch Hashem, he wants to fulfill the will of God. And if he made a mistake and he stumbled, here he's able to correct himself. David HaMelech was not embarrassed. How do we know that? What is the verse that teaches us that? Because the verse says, "V'adabra ba'edeisecha neged melachim v'lo evosh," and I will speak of your testimonies in front, opposite kings, and I will not be embarrassed. I'll never be embarrassed. First of all, I won't be embarrassed because I'm confident in what I'm saying. I really know what I'm saying. I'm sure about myself. But even if it is that the kings point out certain things to me that might not be exactly as it should be, but nevertheless, I'll never feel embarrassed because I know that whatever I can learn to serve you, God, better is better for me as well. He was truly humble in the fullest sense of the word. Tana. It was taught in a Tosefta from a Tanaitic tradition. Lo Mephibosheth Shemo. The name of this person that we're speaking about here was not Mephibosheth. Ela, but rather Ish-Bosheth. His name was Ish-Bosheth Shemo. That's his name. V'lama nikra shmo Mephibosheth? Why therefore was he called by the name of Mephibosheth? Shehaya mevayesh pnei David b'halacha. The reason that he was called Mephibosheth, remember we said David HaMelech wasn't embarrassed, and he would ask Mephibosheth for a second opinion. Why was he called Mephibosheth if his name really was Ish-Bosheth, a man, Ish-Bosheth? Shehaya mevayesh pnei David b'halacha, because he used to embarrass the face of King David in halacha. He used to physically embarrass King David. And that's why he was called Mephibosheth. Mipi Boshet. From my mouth is embarrassment. This man, Mephibosheth, used to embarrass King David in halacha. He would prove him wrong. He would tell him stories about why what he said is not the correct thing. And he would say all sorts of things that would embarrass him. After all of this, Lefikach, therefore, Zachar David, the King David merited, V'yatza mimenu kilav, and he merited to have a son who was a very wise son, and his name was Chileab. We see a number of lessons here again as well. Once again, people who are on the path of Torah, where they are working on themselves to be greater people and better people, they don't feel a sense of embarrassment even when somebody embarrasses them, and even when the person embarrasses them incorrectly, they still don't feel embarrassed. This is, of course, an amazing level to achieve. We're not saying everybody can achieve the level, and certainly not in 1 second. But we are saying that by learning this Torah, we begin to learn that life is more serious. It's more a reality check than it is a joke. Meaning to say, when we encounter real life situations, we should know something. There are always going to be people who will embarrass us. Why do they do that? They are terrible people. Why does a person feel that he has to go up to somebody and physically embarrass him in private, embarrass him in front of other people? And people walk around and they say, but I'm a good person. But the person who embarrasses the other, he's a murderer. Because when a person embarrasses another person, the blood flows out of his face and his face turns white. This is like a person who murders him, and he takes the blood out of his system completely. And yet people continue to do it on a daily basis. They embarrass others. But the Torah teaches us, if we are on this level that, like King David, that he never felt the embarrassment, then he didn't act up against the embarrassment. He didn't show his anger and his displeasure. He simply absorbed the embarrassment within himself. Because of that, he merited a very wise son. And that's a basic principle that the Torah says, that when we undergo a pain that we were not deserving of at all, somebody embarrassed us. Why are they embarrassing us? I have no idea. What's got it into people's heads that they have to embarrass other people? Do they think that they're better? Do they think because they're more wealthy, it gives them more power? Because they're stronger, they can behave like a jungle, as if they're an animal in the jungle, and they can destroy the other person? That's what gives them the right. Be a good person. Stop with the embarrassment already. It's enough. Let's take a look at the notes on the side here, which say that his name was not Mephibosheth. Lo Mephibosheth Shmo. The medieval commentaries, Tosafot and others, question the version of the Gemara as it appears before us. Mephibosheth was not his name, rather Ish-Bosheth was his name. As Mephibosheth and Ish-Bosheth were two different people, and there's no indication of any confusion regarding their names. One solution is a suggestion of an alternative version of the text. His name was not Mephibosheth, rather Neriv Baal was his name, referring to the son of Jonathan, who actually had two different names. It seems to be that Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan. It's very interesting because we know that Jonathan was the good friend of King David, and Mephibosheth was his son. So Mephibosheth, the son of his best friend, was the one who used to do the embarrassing. The next note over here deals with Chileab. Who was Chileab? Chileab was one of the sons of King David. He was very smart. Several alternative explanations for his name were suggested. Chileab is related to the Hebrew lekol av, a father to all, lekol av, which alludes to the fact that he was a teacher who taught and issued rulings for all, says Rabbi Yehonatan ben Korish. Others suggest that Chileab is similar to the Hebrew ke'ilu av, an allusion to his appearance, which was strikingly similar to that of his father David. So he was ke'ilu, like as if ke'ilu av. He was like his father. He looked like his father. He was certainly a very wise son, and David HaMelech merited this son because of his acceptance of the embarrassment that he went through from Mephibosheth, and he didn't react back, he didn't shout back, he didn't scream, he didn't react physically, he accepted the embarrassment. The next background note over here we have is teaching us a little bit about the language of the Gemara, Tana. What does the word Tana mean? We've already learned the word Tanya. The word Tanya means it was learnt in a Braita, and we learned before that a Braita is an external teaching outside of the Mishnah. It's like qualifies as a teaching of the Mishnah, but it wasn't put into the Mishnah. It remained outside the Mishnah, but its value is like a Mishnah. Now the word Tana, as we see over here, Tana lo Mephibosheth shmo el Ish-Bosheth, so Ish-Bosheth shmo, Tana literally, this word means taught, and is generally employed to introduce a quote from the Tosefta. Tosefta and a Braita, these are both similar types of teachings. They are external teachings from the Mishnah. They were compiled and made note of externally. They were not compiled within the Mishnah itself. Although occasionally a Tosefta will be cited without this introduction, the Tosefta is a compendium of Taniyatic statements that are second in importance only to the Mishnah. The meaning of the word Tana falls somewhere between the words Tanan, we learnt, which introduces a Mishnah, and the weaker term, Tanya, it was taught, which introduces a Braita. The Tosefta cited does not necessarily appear in the compendium that constitutes the Tosefta, which is appended to each tractate and may be part of collections no longer available to us. So he says over here, V'omar Rabbi Yochanan. We continue. Rabbi Yochanan said, Lo Chileab Shmo. His name was not Chileab. Ela Daniel. His name was, in fact, Daniel. Daniel Shmo. Daniel was his name. He was never called Chileab. Why was he called Chileab then? So the Gemara asked the question. V'lama nikra Shmo Chileab? Why was his name called Chileab? Why did they call him Chileab if his name was Daniel? Answer. Shehaya machlim penei Mephibosheth b'halacha. Because you know what he used to do? He used to embarrass the face of Mephibosheth in halacha. Oh, amazing. Mephibosheth, who was King David, used to consult with Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth used to embarrass King David. And what did King David merit? King David merited the son by the name of Chileab, Daniel. But he, Chileab, why was he called Chileab? Because he was machlim, from the word call, machlim, penei Mephibosheth b'halacha. He used to embarrass Mephibosheth in halacha. So to speak, he got his own dues. He got his own dues back to him. He got what was coming to him. He embarrassed King David in halacha, and as a result, King David merited a child who in turn would, so to speak, bring embarrassment to Mephibosheth in halacha. Ve'olav omar Shlomo b'chokhmaso, and about him, about Chileab, meaning about Daniel, the son of King David, this is who Shlomo HaMelech was speaking about in his wisdom when he quoted in the book of Mishlei, in his book of all his wise statements, B'ni, my son, im chacham libecha, if your heart will be wise, yismach libi gam ani, then my heart too will rejoice. This pasuk that King Shlomo said was referring to King David's expression towards his son Chileab. If you'll be wise, my son, you'll make me happy also. V'omer, and he says, Chacham b'ni v'samach libi v'ashiva chorfi davar, which means, be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, and I will respond. I will respond to those. I will respond with something to those who taunt me. I will be able to respond back. If you are wise, and we know many stories of, for example, a very average person. He doesn't seem to accomplish all that much in life. And then afterwards, he has a son who is exceptionally wise. The son becomes a successful whatever, fill in the missing blank. Perhaps he's a great brain surgeon in his life. Perhaps he's a great heart surgeon, and he saves the lives of great people in the world and ordinary people, and he's just a great man. Perhaps he runs the bank. The son is a very wise son, and he becomes the chief officer of the bank. He runs the bank. When people have financial matters to deal with in the economy, they go to him for advice. But the father was only a simple man. But when people see that the son has achieved that, then the father will have what to answer to those people. Which means to say, when people come and embarrass the Father will have to answer and say, you think I'm a nothing, but look at the son that I brought into the world. That son has been brought up because I brought him up. I taught him certain values, and I brought him to the level that he's at, and he has achieved those things now. I am proud of that son. And so therefore you can taunt me as much as you want to, but I have the last say. I have the last laugh, because I'm the one that says it is my son that is able to grant you the home that you need because he runs the bank. Or it was my son that was able to give you a new heart because he's the heart surgeon. Or it was my son that was able to give your son a bris milah. Or it was my son that was able to write the Sefer Torah that you read from in shul. Or it was my son that did X, Y, and Z. And even though I might be a simple person, nevertheless, look at the son that I brought into the world. I have the last laugh. And this is what Shlomo HaMelech was saying over here. Chacham b'ni, v'samach libi. Be wise, my son, and let my heart rejoice. V'ashiva chorfi davar. And I will be able to answer something back to those who taunt me. When they taunt me, I will have something to show them. Who do they think they are? I'm not just a simple person. I have brought something into the world that none of them have even begun to get to that type of a level. We've reached the end of the shiur. I thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this shiur. I found it to be an exciting shiur. The Gemara that we're studying here, it's filled with so much wisdom. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I say, if you did enjoy the shiur, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell so that you'll be notified of future shiurim, and perhaps put a positive comment below if you can. I would appreciate it. It gives me the encouragement to know that you're enjoying the shiurim and that it's worthwhile, this type of teaching that we're doing over here. In the meantime, you're always welcome to keep in touch with me and join the shiurim live if you wish to. Just visit my site. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet, and my site is www.lovingkindness.co. Feel free to be in touch. Send me an email, and I would be happy to be in touch with you. And as for now, I wish you everything of the best and hope to see you soon. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.